They found her by the dry riverbed where even the snakes had stopped coiling. Her skirt was torn at the knees, her blouse stiff with blood and prairie dust. Flies had started their quiet work. She was breathing barely. A blue welt wrapped her throat like a noose. One shoe gone, the other cracked at the sole. They thought she was a whore at first, left behind after some rowdy cattlemen passed through. It wasn't uncommon. But then old Molly Dunn, the midwife with eyes sharp as glass, recognized her beneath the dirt. "That's Miss Elira Mays," she said, "the schoolteacher." The words moved like a current through Hollow Junction. Elira Mays, the girl who came from back east with books and a voice that didn't quiver, who taught the children to write proper and told them there was more to the world than the edge of the hills. Some said she was too proud. Others said she was too thin to last a winter. And now here she was, skin hanging off her bones, lips split open, one eye purple and closed like a bloomed fig. The doctor worked on her in silence. Sheriff Keeley stood nearby, fists clenched. No one asked questions, not yet, not until she could speak, but there were whispers about the school board voting to cut her pay again, about certain fathers not liking the way she corrected their sons, about her refusing handouts even when the snow came early. They said she hadn't eaten properly in weeks. She woke 3 days later in the back room of Molly's home. Her voice rasped like paper tearing. "They dragged me outside the schoolhouse," she said. "4 of them said I wasn't needed, called me a mouthy thing." "Do you know their names?" Keeley asked. Elira turned her face to the wall. She wouldn't say. "Not yet." Clayton Ridge didn't belong to anyone, but everyone knew who kept it breathing. Calder Ross, rancher of Black Fen Hollow, ran cattle from the basin to the high cliffs. His land sprawled over 500 acres of rock, river, and broken pine. He'd built it after the war, trading blood money and a shattered leg for 20 cows and a borrowed rifle. He didn't speak much, didn't show at town dances. He had no wife, no siblings, no children, just his land, his horses, and a silver pocket watch that had once belonged to a Union general. People called him hard, called him lucky, but luck had nothing to do with it. He heard about Elira through his ranch foreman. The men were talking about it over cards. "She got what was common," one said. Ross looked up. "You know who did it." "Doesn't matter," the man shrugged. "She's a woman with ideas. This ain't Boston." And she was always hungry looking, like she didn't know how to take care of herself. Ross stood slow. "You open your mouth again, I'll pull your tongue out through your teeth." He meant it, and the man knew it. A week later, Ross came to town for supplies. He stopped by the schoolhouse. Boards were nailed over the windows. The bell hung crooked, rope missing. No one had cleaned the blood near the back steps. He found her at Molly's, sitting in a chair near the stove, hands wrapped in a wool blanket. Her hair was tied back now, but uneven, as if someone had hacked it with a knife. "You're Elira Mays," he said. She looked up. Her mouth tightened. "You're Calder, Ross." He gave a slow nod. "I need someone to teach a boy," he said. 11, smart but stubborn. His mother died last winter. He hasn't spoken in months. "I don't teach anymore," she replied. "You will." "I won't go back to the schoolhouse." "I'm not asking you to." She studied him. He didn't blink, didn't smile, just waited. "I have nothing," she said finally. "No money, no family. No protection." "I know." He reached into his coat, took out a silver coin and placed it on the table. "For food and boots, I'll be back in 3 days." Then he left, and something inside her, something starved and near dead, stirred. They said it was madness, that Ross had no business bringing a woman like her to the ranch, a woman with scars and secrets, but he did it anyway. Rode into town 3 days later with a covered wagon, a new coat folded on the seat beside him, and a battered school satchel he'd found at the general store. Elira didn't speak much on the ride. Her voice still cracked if she used it too long, but she watched everything. The way the trees bent at the pass, the way he handled the horses, the way he never once looked at her like she was broken. When they reached Black Fen Hollow, the boy was waiting. His name was Jonah, pale Lane with eyes too wide for his face. He didn't speak, didn't look at her when Ross introduced them, just nodded once and slipped back into the barn. "You'll sleep in the east room," Ross said. "It locks from the inside." That night Elira lay in a bed with clean sheets. Her skin burned from the bathwater, her stomach ached from food, but she didn't cry. She hadn't cried since the night they dragged her through the snow. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and whispered a list of names. Not out loud, not yet, but soon. And when she was strong enough, when her hands stopped trembling and her back could bear weight again, she would not just remember. She would repay, not with mercy, with fire. Jonah didn't speak for the first 2 weeks. He'd watch Elira with narrowed eyes, lurking in doorways or crouched in the loft like some feral thing. He listened, though. When she read aloud in the mornings, her voice still hoarse but steady, he stood just outside the room. When she swept the floor or stitched the hem of a torn curtain, he kept his distance, but he never strayed far. Elira didn't press him. She knew the shape of silence, knew how it wrapped itself around the bones after grief, like frost tightening a branch until it split clean. She let the hours fill with small labors, copywork by candlelight. Water drawn from the creek, still cold from the mountain's melt. She cooked what she could, never much. Oats, salt pork, wild onions when she found them near the fence line. There were no luxuries here, only use. Ross came and went. Long rides across the range, dealings with ranch hands, fencing to mend. He rarely spoke more than needed. But each night he brought something to the table, an old primer, a tin of preserved peaches, once a spool of blue thread. She said thank you always, and he nodded as if it were a fair trade. It was the 3rd week when Jonah finally entered the room on his own. Elira was stitching by the fire, a rip in her only coat. He sat across from her, hands tucked under his thighs, eyes wide and wary. She didn't look up right away, just kept working. Then she said, quiet and sure, "You're not stupid." He blinked, "You're scared." "But not stupid." He looked away, jaw tight. She tied the thread, bit it off. "When you're ready, I'll show you how to hold a pen without your hand shaking. When you're ready, I'll teach you how to use your voice like a knife. So they can't ignore it." He didn't answer, but the next morning he sat at the table while she read, and the morning after that he mouthed the words. Snow came late that year, but hard. By November, drifts reached the bottom steps of the barn, and the sky never cleared. The wind moaned through the rafters like a ghost calling names. Elira grew stronger, her cheeks filled. The bruises faded into yellow smudges, then vanished altogether. But the cold pressed into her bones, and some nights she woke sweating, breath caught in her throat. Ross didn't ask, but he noticed. He left a knife by her bedside. Sharpened clean, she didn't thank him, just tucked it under the mattress and slept without flinching. In town, her name stopped being spoken in public, but behind doors the story twisted. Some said she'd lured Ross, that she'd seduced him with her ruined beauty and sad little mouth. Others said she was practicing witchery out at Black Fen, filling the boy's head with lies and spells. Sheriff Keeley visited once before the pass iced over. He stayed only an hour, sipping coffee while Elira fed the chickens. "Some folks been asking questions," he told Ross. Ross stared out the window. "Let them." Keeley nodded. "She ever say who it was?" Ross shook his head. "She will," Keeley muttered. "Eventually." But Ross knew better. She wouldn't give them the names, not unless she meant to use them. It was during a storm in December that the first letter came. Folded twice, slipped under the barn door. No name, no return. Elira opened it at the kitchen table. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. Only one line, "You think that land makes him safe. It won't." She read it twice, then burned it in the stove. Ross watched the paper curl and vanish. "Someone from town. They want me scared," she said. He didn't ask who. Didn't try to stop her when she pulled on her coat and boots and walked out into the snow, rifle strapped to her back. She made a wide circle around the ranch, eyes sharp. Fox tracks, nothing else. When she came back in, cheeks red, she poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to him without a word. From then on, she carried the rifle every time she stepped outside. Jonah began to speak in sentences, short ones, quiet but sure. "Elira," he said one night, "why did they hurt you?" The fire cracked. She didn't look away. "Because I made them feel small." He blinked, thinking, "They were afraid of you." "No," she said, "they were afraid of what I knew and what I refused to forget." Jonah nodded slowly, like he understood something bigger than language. "They won't come here, will they?" Elira looked toward the window, toward the dark beyond the panes. "Not while the snow holds." Ross gave her space, but he watched her change. The girl who'd arrived with hollows under her eyes now stood taller, spoke slower. There was a sharpness to her silence, a weight in her step. He'd seen men come back from war looking less haunted, but there was something else in her now, purpose. One night, deep in January, she stood at the doorway with her coat on, breathing in the night. He joined her. "Elira," he said. She didn't turn, just listened to the wind. "I want to show you something." He led her to the small stable behind the house. There, under a wool blanket, stood a mare, dappled gray, eyes dark as oil. "She's yours," he said. Elira stared. "I don't need a gift." "She's not a gift. She's a promise." Elira ran her hand along the horse's neck. The mare shivered but didn't pull away. "Promise of what?" "That you can leave," he said, "or that you can stay, but either way, no one will stop you again." She looked at him then. Not with thanks, but with recognition. That night she didn't sleep. She sat at the table, writing in the dark, names, times, details. It was no longer just remembering. It was planning, not rage, not even vengeance. It was justice, grown cold and hard like the ground beneath Black Fen Hollow, and when the snow thawed, she would act. By March, the thaw had begun. Streams broke open from under the ice, flooding the lower trails. Mud swallowed boots whole. The hills, once white and still, wept with meltwater and loose stone. At Black Fen Hollow, the cattle grew restless, snorting steam into the wind. Winter had not killed them, but hunger stalked their flanks. Elira moved with purpose now. She woke before dawn, packed the lessons for Jonah, rode the mare Ross had given her down to the ravine and back before the frost could bite her hands. She said little, observed everything. Jonah kept close. He'd grown taller, shoulders pulling straight. He asked questions now, not childish ones, but sharp. Why do people lie? Why do the good die first? Why do some men carry guns and others just carry fear? Elira never gave easy answers. She told him truth was a blade. You don't swing it wild, you wait, you let it shine in the dark. He understood. By then, he always did. She returned to the town for the first time in nearly 5 months. She rode in on the mare with her coat buttoned high, a satchel at her hip. She passed the general store where 2 old men stood carving dice from antler. They stopped talking. She passed the smithy, the doors wide open, the heat inside trembling the air. The blacksmith's wife looked at her, then turned away. Elira didn't pause. She stopped in front of the courthouse and dismounted. Inside, the clerk recognized her. He looked up, went pale, and reached for something behind the counter. "Miss Mays," he said, stiff, "you've no call to—" "I'm here for records," she said. "Land titles, school board appointments. 1877 through 79. He hesitated. "I've the right," she added. You'll find my name in the minutes." He fetched the ledgers, didn't charge her. She sat in the far corner, reading page after page until the sun dropped behind the town jail. She traced each name, each signature. She wrote none of it down, just nodded to herself. Then she left. Outside, Keely stood leaning against the rail post. Elira. She met his eyes. "You should let this die," he said. "You got your quiet now, that boy, that rancher." Her voice came like a knife unsheathed. "I didn't die. And neither did they." "You tell me who it was," Keely said. "Let the law take it." "No. Elira. No." She turned, mounted her mare, and rode out before the stars rose. Behind her, the town sagged into the hush of evening. But inside certain homes, curtains twitched. They knew, and they were afraid. At the hollow, spring came in shards, broken branches, mud-slick roots. The chickens drowned in a flash flood. A calf died in the ravine. Ross and his men worked with little sleep, but Elira moved through it untouched. She had other work. She mailed 2 letters from a roadhouse 20 miles south, both addressed to counties far east, where the names of men had been forgotten but not erased. Within weeks, replies came. Elira read them under lamplight, folded them into her satchel, and said nothing. That same month, a stranger came riding to the ranch. Midday, dust on his coat, mud on his boots, he asked for Ross. They stood apart near the stable. Elira watched from the house window. When Ross returned, his expression was cold. "You know a man called Cyril Harbuck?" "No," she said, though the name stirred something deep. "He says he's kin to one of the trustees who hired you. He's been asking questions." "About me? About what happened?" Elira walked to the hearth and pulled the kettle off the hook. "Did he say why he came now?" "Said someone paid him." She nodded. "Then they're trying to shake me, scare me, see if I run." Ross watched her as she poured water over the coffee grounds, slow and careful. "You're not going to run," he said. "No." "Then you should be ready." She looked up. "I've been ready since the night they left me in the snow." Of it. 2 nights later, someone cut the fence near the south pasture, let 3 cows loose into the gorge. Ross found the tracks, 2 sets, horsemen. They circled back toward town. He didn't speak of it at breakfast, but Elira noticed the new gun on his belt, not his usual one. This one was heavier, the kind meant for ending things. Jonah watched them both, quiet but not afraid. Later that day, he came to Elira with a folded paper in his hands. "I want to know how to sign my name," he said. She taught him, 1 line at a time. She didn't tell him that he would need that name soon, or that the world he was growing into would demand he fight for the right to keep it. At dusk, she opened the drawer beneath her bed and took out the list. 9 names, 3 crossed out. 2 fled the county, 1 dead, that left 3. She folded the paper, kissed her fingers, and tapped it once. The next day she rode east, past the creek, beyond the pines, into the old timber camp where one of them worked the saw line. He didn't see her coming. He never thought she'd leave the ranch. But she walked straight into the shed where he lay drunk on a cot, and when he blinked up at her, trying to sit, she pressed the edge of the knife into his throat. He wept before he spoke. She didn't ask for truth, she already had it. She asked for names, he gave them. She asked for what they'd planned, he told her. She carved nothing into his skin, left no mark, just took what she needed and walked back out into the dark. When she returned to Black Fen, her coat was torn at the hem. She didn't explain, she didn't need to. Ross saw the fire in her eyes and asked no questions, not yet. But the next morning he wired for a lawyer. And Jonah began writing sentences. Sentences about wrong things made right, about a woman who would not die, about the long winter and what followed, about truth sharpened to a point, like a knife. By May, the grass had come back. Not lush, but enough. Enough for the cattle to chew slow under the sun, enough for the boy to lie in and stare at the clouds while Elira read aloud about ancient wars and ruined empires. The hollow was green again, but the color brought no ease. Something hung in the air, tight as wire, ready to snap. Elira knew it. Ross knew it. Jonah felt it too, though he couldn't name it yet. It was the part before fire. When everything smelled sweet, when everything waited. The lawyer arrived in a gray coat and city shoes. Ross met him at the creekside, where the road was worst, guided him up through the ravine himself, boots sinking in mud. Elira didn't greet him. She had already sent her packet, statements sworn by hand, each page numbered and signed. She gave no testimony aloud, no tears, just details, names, times, the dates of the school board's votes. The day's food was withheld from her wages. The letter slipped under her door telling her to resign or suffer the lesson. The men who voted to shut the schoolhouse down, the men who stayed after dark. One of them had since become the town's deputy mayor. Another, a church elder. The lawyer read in silence, lips thinning line by line. He left with everything packed in a steel case, riding fast back east. "Do you think it's enough?" Ross asked her that night. "It's never enough," she said, "but it's a beginning." He nodded, neither mentioned that it might paint a target on the ranch, or that it already had. Jonah found the trap first. Snare wire set low, hidden in the tall grass near the woodpile, sharp enough to cut a leg clean, meant for wolves or coyotes, or worse. He came back to the house, pale. Elira took the wire and tucked it under the stove. That night she sat sharpening her knife until long after midnight. She didn't look up when Ross spoke from the doorway. "You can't fight every shadow, Elira." She turned to him. "Then I'll bring them into the light." He didn't try to stop her. A week later, word came from town. The church elder, Abram Lee, was found dead in his own barn, hung from a beam, note pinned to his chest. 2 words, "God knows." The town panicked. Keeley sent for the circuit marshal. Rumors bloomed. That Elira had cursed him, that she was behind it, that she had help from the rancher, or worse, witchcraft from the high timber, but Keeley knew better. He came up to Black Fen Hollow again, this time with a folded handkerchief in his pocket and gray at his temples. "Someone's protecting you," he told her. "Maybe it's Ross, maybe it's something bigger, but these men, they're falling." Elira only poured him coffee. "I gave you names," she said. "I remember." "You didn't act. You were barely breathing." "I'm breathing now." He nodded, slow. "I believe you, Elira, but belief don't make justice." "No," she said, "but I do." That night, Ross found her in the stable, brushing down the mare. He stood in silence until she finished. "You plan to kill them yourself." "No," she said. "I plan to show what they are. Then I'll let the world decide." "They'll come for you." "They already did." She turned to him. "Why are you helping me, Ross?" He took a long breath, jaw tight. "Because I've seen men do what they did in war. In towns like this, and I've seen what happens when no one answers it." She stared at him, searching his face. "I'm not trying to be saved." "I'm not trying to save you," he said, "but I can stand beside you." And she nodded. That was enough. On the first Sunday of June, she returned to town again. This time in daylight, this time in silence. She wore a plain dress, her boots laced tight. Jonah rode with her, holding a bundle of his own writings. His voice was steady. He was no longer afraid. They walked into the church as the bells began to toll. Elira sat in the third pew. Jonah sat beside her. The preacher stuttered when he saw her. She bowed her head, said nothing. Let the weight of her presence do the work. After the sermon, she rose and walked to the front, past the pulpit, where the new church elder sat pale and sweating. She laid Jonah's bundle on the altar. "They'll print these," she said. "And when they do, you'll be in them." The elder opened his mouth, closed it. "Leave us alone," he said, but his voice was small, and she had already turned her back. Outside, people stared. Some lowered their heads, some met her eyes and said nothing. Not a soul reached to stop her. Back at the hollow, the cattle grazed under the stars. Ross met her on the porch. "It's done," she said. "No," he replied. "It started." And she knew he was right. In the hills above the ranch, someone watched. They would not forget her name, but now they would not forget her power either. She had been beaten, starved, left for dead, and she had risen not to beg, not to run, but to speak, to stand, and to fight until the last man fell. By late June, the heat came down like judgment. Dust curled up from the road in long, lazy spirals. The cattle pressed their flanks into shade, flies thick around their eyes. At Black Fen Hollow, even the trees seemed to hold their breath. But Alira moved like the season didn't touch her. She had work more than teaching now. She rose early and wrote until the light changed. Letters, statements, declarations. She was building a fire, word by word, and the pages smelled like smoke. Jonah copied each one in his own hand, careful and neat, learning how to use words like nails. She was teaching him the trade of truth, even if it bled. Ross watched her from the field, shirt soaked through with sweat. He didn't ask what she was planning. He only made sure there was wood by the stove, water drawn before dusk, and a gun by each doorway. One night she opened a letter by lamplight and went still. "What is it?" he asked. "They're printing it," she said. "Where?" "St. Louis. They're calling it the Hollow Testimony." He nodded once. "It'll reach far." "Yes. They'll come. I want them to." 3 days later, the first rider came. Not a sheriff, not a messenger. A man Alira recognized by the way he didn't meet her eyes. Mitch Tallard, one of the four. He rode up just after dawn, sweat streaking his brow. Rode slow, like he expected the earth to rise and split beneath him. Ross met him at the gate. Alira stood by the barn, arms crossed. Tallard dismounted, lips dry, hands trembling. "I didn't know what they meant to do," he said. "I swear, I thought it was just a warning." Ross didn't speak. Alira walked toward him, step by step. "You held me down," she said. Tallard flinched. "You tore the ledger from my desk," and laughed. He swallowed. I did." "Why?" "I was weak. I wanted to belong." "You still weak." He shook his head. "I came to say I'm sorry." Alira looked him over, dirt on his cuffs. Scars on his knuckles, a man unraveling from the inside out. "No," she said. "You came to ask if I was going to name you." Tallard didn't reply. She stepped closer. "Did you stop them?" "No." "Then yes. I'm going to name you." He crumpled like a drunk before a judge. Ross moved, but Alira raised her hand. Let him leave. Let him ride all the way back with his fear. Tallard stumbled to his horse, rode off without a word. And Alira watched until he vanished behind the rise. That night she stood at the edge of the porch, watching lightning flicker on the horizon. Ross joined her, hands calloused and quiet. "You could let it end here," he said. "Let the papers speak for you." "I don't want them to speak," she said. "I want them to see." "Who?" "Everyone. Even Jonah." She looked back toward the house. Inside, the boy slept with a knife tucked under his pillow and a copy of Cicero beside his bed. "Yes," she said, "especially Jonah." In town, the whispers turned to fire. Pages of the hollow testimony arrived folded in strangers' pockets, left in pews, slipped beneath saloon doors. The school board resigned in silence. One of the accused men packed his things and vanished overnight. Another was found unconscious near the train tracks, jaw broken. Keeley tried to keep peace, but the town was splintering. Some wanted Alira punished for bringing shame. Others wanted her elected to the board. A few just wanted her gone, but she didn't come back. She let the words burn, and the fire crawled closer. In July, someone poisoned the water barrel behind the barn. Jonah found the dead birds first. Ross tasted the metal in the water and cursed. "Elira," he said, "it's time to leave." "No. They want you dead." They already had that chance. Ross stepped close, voice hard. "You think you owe the truth your life. You think justice tastes sweeter if you die for it." She looked up at him, heat rising between them like thunder. "I don't care how it tastes," she said. "I care that it's seen." He stared at her, then nodded once, sharp as a promise. "I'll keep you standing. Then I'll do the rest." She left the next morning before the sun rose, riding north with Jonah behind her. They stopped at the hill above town. She pointed to each building. "There," she said, "that's where they laughed after. That's where the boys who mocked you were taught to do it. That's where they prayed and still let it happen." Jonah said nothing. He just watched. Elira reached into her satchel and took out the last copy of the hollow testimony. She tore it into 4 pieces. Then she buried it under a cairn of stone, marked with a carved J. "For when you forget," she said, "so you remember to remember." Jonah knelt beside it. "I won't forget. I know." Back at the ranch, Ross waited on the porch, rifle across his lap. When Elira rode in, he stood, relief etched quiet into his face. She dismounted, walked up the steps. Looked at him like she'd never seen him before, and then like she'd always seen him. He didn't speak. He just reached for her hand. And for the first time since they dragged her through the snow and left her for gone, she let someone hold it. The last came in August, cloaked in dust and silence. Sela's morn, the worst of them. The one who'd laughed as they kicked her ribs in. The one who whispered in her ear while she bled through her teeth, "Nobody's gonna care, little teacher." He hadn't fled, he'd waited, let the others crumble, confident the fire would pass him by. But fire moves slow before it swallows. Elira was splitting kindling behind the barn when she saw the rider. She stood without blinking. Ross stepped onto the porch with his rifle, Jonah just behind, tall and quiet now, nearly 12, already familiar with the shape of vengeance. "Stay back," she said. Ross didn't argue. Silas dismounted like he owned the ground. Same sneer, same loose-limbed swagger, but his eyes flicked to the side, scanning for help that wasn't coming. "You made quite a name for yourself," he said, brushing dust from his coat. She didn't answer. "They got your words in St. Louis. Printing your tears for money." Still she said nothing. "You think a story enough?" he asked. "You think that fixes anything?" Elira stepped forward. "No," she said, "but it ends something." Silas chuckled. "You want me to beg?" "No," she said again. "I want you to tell Jonah what you did." He blinked. The boy stepped up beside her, arms crossed. Brown from the sun, tall for his age, but his eyes were stone. "Tell him," Elira said, "what you and the others did to the schoolteacher." Silas laughed once, then saw no one else was laughing, no men to back him, no badge, no backroom smirks, just a boy. And the woman he didn't kill, he looked at Jonah. "I hurt her," he muttered. "Say it plain," Elira said. "I beat her," Silas said. "I helped them, I left her there." The boy didn't blink. Elira stepped closer. "Now say why." Silas opened his mouth, then closed it. Shame stripped his face of all cleverness. Because we were scared, he said at last. Because she knew more than us, because she wouldn't bend. The wind picked up, dust swirled around their boots. Elira nodded. That's the only honest thing you've said. She pulled a folded sheet from her coat, set it on the trough beside them. Sign it, she said. A confession, sent east, filed under your own hand. He looked at the page like it was a death warrant. Or what? He asked. I don't need to threaten you, she said. You're already forgotten. This is your only chance to be remembered as something more than what you were. He stared at her, then he took the pencil, signed, shaking. She took the paper, folded it, turned her back on him, and walked away. He rode out an hour later, slower than he'd come. Jonah watched until the dust settled. That fall the schoolhouse reopened, not in town, but on Black Fen land, where Ross built a single-room structure just east of the barn, with new timbers and tall windows. The bell from the old schoolhouse hung in the rafters, but Elira left it silent. She taught 6 children. Jonah helped her. Sometimes he read aloud while she stitched their lessons into something that would last past winter. They didn't talk of the men anymore. Some were gone, some were disgraced. A few still lived, quiet as mice under floorboards. But the world had shifted, not clean, but enough. One night, Elira sat with Ross under a wide, clear sky, the stars pressed down like memory. I keep thinking I'll stop feeling it, she said. What they did. What I became because of it. Ross lit a match, touched it to his pipe. You don't have to stop feeling it, he said. You just have to live beside it. She nodded, the silence stretched, gentle now. I would have died that winter, she said. If you hadn't come. You were already halfway back, he said. I just held the gate. She leaned against him, slow, not seeking shelter, just choosing it. By the time the first frost came, Jonah had written his own story. It wasn't about her, not directly, but it told of a woman who carried truth like a lantern into a town that had never seen it, and a boy who watched her build a fire no one could extinguish. He signed it with his full name, Jonah Mays. And when he read it aloud, she didn't cry. She just looked out the window, past the cattle, past the hills, and knew she'd come further than any map could show, not a victim, not even a survivor, but the storm that followed and stayed.